In the annals of military firearms history, few weapons have captured the imagination of collectors, historians and firearms enthusiasts quite like the Fallschirmjägergewehr 42, better known simply as the FG-42. This German automatic rifle, developed during the darkest days of World War II, represented a quantum leap in small arms design that was decades ahead of its time. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating story of this remarkable weapon, from its conception in the aftermath of a disastrous airborne operation to its legacy that continues to influence rifle design even in the 21st century. To truly understand the FG-42, we must first transport ourselves back to May 1941 to the Mediterranean island of Crete. The German Wehrmacht had launched Operation Mercury, the largest airborne invasion in history up to that point. Thousands of Fallschirmjäger, Germany's elite paratroopers, descended from the skies onto the Greek island in what was supposed to be a swift and decisive victory. Instead, they walked into a bloodbath. The Fallschirmjäger found themselves fighting British, Commonwealth, and Greek forces in brutal close quarters, combat across rocky terrain, olive groves, and fortified positions. While Germany ultimately captured the island, the victory came at an enormous cost. Nearly a quarter of the paratroopers involved became casualties, with over 2,000 killed in action. The post-battle analysis revealed a critical flaw in the paratroopers' equipment that had contributed significantly to their casualties. The standard procedure for German airborne operations required paratroopers to jump with only pistols and grenades. Their primary weapons, typically the Karabiner 98K bolt-action rifle or the MP-40 submachine gun, were dropped separately in weapons containers. This meant that soldiers landing on Crete found themselves armed with nothing more than handguns, facing well-armed defenders with rifles and machine guns. Many Fallschirmjäger were cut down before they could even reach their weapon containers. Others spent precious minutes under fire, desperately searching for their equipment instead of returning fire or seeking cover. The survivors of Crete made their complaints heard loud and clear through the chain of command. They needed a weapon that could be carried during the jump, something that wouldn't be separated from them upon landing. But this weapon couldn't be just any firearm. It needed to fulfill multiple roles simultaneously. It had to serve as a semi-automatic rifle for accurate long-range shooting, like the American M1 Garand. It needed to provide fully automatic fire like a submachine gun for close-quarters combat. It had to be light enough for a paratrooper to carry along with all his other equipment, yet powerful enough to be effective at combat ranges. And it needed to be compact enough that it wouldn't snag on parachute lines or interfere with the jump. In essence, the Fallschirmjäger were asking for the impossible, a weapon that combined the capabilities of a rifle, a light machine gun, and a submachine gun, all in one package that wouldn't weigh them down. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, which controlled the Fallschirmjäger units, issued a requirement for this new weapon in late 1941. The specifications were extraordinarily demanding. The rifle had to fire the full-power 7.92 by 57mm Mauser cartridge, the standard German rifle round, not the weaker pistol cartridges used in submachine guns. It needed to be selective fire, meaning it could switch between semi-automatic and fully automatic modes. It had to weigh no more than 5 kilograms when loaded, roughly the same as a standard Kar 98K rifle, despite having far more capabilities. It needed a folding or detachable bipod for stability when used as a light machine gun, and it had to accept a bayonet and be capable of mounting an optical sight for precision shooting. Oh, and one more thing, it needed to be ready for production as quickly as possible. Several German firearms manufacturers looked at these requirements and politely declined. The specifications seemed to defy the laws of physics and engineering. How could a weapon firing a full-power rifle cartridge in fully automatic mode be controllable at such a light weight? How could they pack all these features into a compact package without making it prohibitively complex or expensive? Most importantly, how could this be done with Germany's industrial capacity already stretched thin supporting a two-front war? The task seemed impossible, but one man thought he could do it. Louis Stang was a relatively unknown firearms designer working for Rheinmetall Borsig when he accepted the challenge. Stange wasn't a household name like John Browning or Mikhail Kalashnikov, but he possessed a brilliant engineering mind and a willingness to think outside the box. He approached the FG-42 project with fresh eyes, unencumbered by traditional assumptions about how rifles should be designed. Over the course of 1942, working under intense pressure and tight deadlines, Stang created something truly revolutionary. The FG-42 that emerged from Stanger's drafting table was unlike anything that had come before it. Let's examine what made this weapon so special, starting with its most innovative feature, the straight-line stock design. In almost every rifle up to that point, the barrel sat above the stock, creating what's called bore axis offset. When you fire such a rifle, especially in automatic mode, the recoil forces create a moment that causes the muzzle to rise or climb. This makes controlling automatic fire extremely difficult. Stanger's solution was elegantly simple yet revolutionary. He positioned the stock directly in line with the barrel, so that the recoil force pushed straight back into the shooter's shoulder rather than creating a climbing motion. This single design choice made the FG-42 far more controllable in automatic fire than weapons twice its weight. This concept was so advanced that it wouldn't become standard in military rifles until the 1960s, with weapons like the AR-15. The operating system Stang chose was equally clever. The FG-42 used a gas-operated rotating bolt mechanism, but with a unique twist. When firing in semi-automatic mode, the weapon fired from a closed bolt, meaning a round was already chambered and the bolt was locked when you pulled the trigger. This made the rifle extremely accurate for precision shooting because there was no heavy bolt slamming forward just as the shot broke. However, when switched to fully automatic mode, the weapon fired from an open bolt, with the bolt held to the rear until the trigger was pulled. This allowed air to circulate through the hot chamber between bursts, reducing the risk of cook-offs, where residual heat could ignite a chambered round unintentionally. To have a weapon that could switch between closed bolt and open bolt operation depending on the fire mode was extraordinarily sophisticated for 1942. Even today, very few firearms employ this system. The feed system was another area where Stang demonstrated innovative thinking. The FG-42 fed from a side-mounted 20-round detachable box magazine. This was unusual for the time, as most rifles fed from below. The side-mounted magazine served several purposes. First, it allowed the shooter to get lower to the ground when firing prone, a significant tactical advantage. Second, it kept the magazine out of the way when using the weapon's bipod. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it kept the rifle's profile narrow, making it less likely to snag during a parachute jump. The magazine well was positioned so that the left side of the weapon remained relatively flat, allowing it to be pressed against the paratrooper's body during descent. The weapon incorporated a muzzle device that served dual purposes. It acted as both a flash hider and a compensator, reducing muzzle flash that could give away the shooter's position, while also directing gases upward to counteract muzzle climb. The FG-42 also featured a blade-style front sight and an adjustable rear aperture sight, calibrated out to 1,200 meters, though realistically effective to perhaps half that distance. Mounting rails allowed the attachment of the ZF-4 4-power telescopic sight, transforming the weapon into a capable designated marksman rifle. A folding spike bayonet was integrated into the design, flipping down from beneath the barrel when needed. The bipod folded neatly under the barrel when not in use, and could be deployed quickly for sustained fire. The weapon's buttstock was skeletal, using a framework of metal struts rather than solid wood or steel, saving weight while maintaining strength. Every component was carefully engineered to save grams here and ounces there, ultimately bringing the weapon in at just under 5 kilograms loaded, meeting the strict weight requirement. But how did it perform? The combat characteristics of the FG-42 were impressive, especially for its era. Firing the full-power 7.92mm Mauser round, it had an effective range of around 400 to 500 meters in semi-automatic mode, comparable to other rifles of the period. In fully automatic mode, it fired at approximately 900 rounds per minute, which was actually relatively slow for a machine gun, but made the weapon more controllable and conserved ammunition. The straight-line stock design meant that experienced shooters could actually fire controlled bursts rather than simply spraying bullets wildly. Accuracy in semi-automatic mode was excellent, particularly when using the bipod and optical sight. Paratroopers could engage targets at ranges that submachine guns couldn't touch, while still having the close-range firepower those weapons provided. The first production models, known today as Type 1 or early pattern FG-42s, began reaching Fallschirmjäger units in late 1942 and early 1943. The initial reception from the troops was enthusiastic. Finally, they had a weapon that could go with them out of the aircraft that could fill multiple roles, and that gave them a fighting chance immediately upon landing. Combat reports from the Mediterranean and later from Italy praised the weapon's versatility and the confidence it gave to paratroopers. However, the FG-42 was not without its problems. The first and most significant issue was manufacturing complexity. In trying to pack so many features into such a light package, Stange had created a weapon that was extraordinarily difficult and expensive to produce. Each FG-42 required extensive machining of high-quality steel, far more labour-intensive than producing a simple bolt-action rifle or even a submachine gun. In a wartime economy where industrial capacity was precious and increasingly strained, this was a serious problem. The weapon also proved to be somewhat fragile. The lightweight construction that made it man-portable also meant that components could be bent or broken more easily than on sturdier weapons. The side-mounted magazine, while clever, was prone to damage, and the feed mechanism could be finicky about ammunition quality. The Type 1 FG-42 also suffered from excessive recoil, despite the straight-line stock design. The combination of a full-power rifle cartridge and minimal weight meant that shooting the weapon was physically punishing, especially in automatic mode. The muzzle blast was fierce, and prolonged firing sessions were exhausting. Paratroopers appreciated what the weapon could do, but many found it uncomfortable to shoot extensively. These issues led to a redesign in 1944. The Type 2, or late pattern FG-42, addressed many of the problems of the original. The stock was changed from wood to stamped steel, reducing costs and increasing durability. The weapon was slightly simplified internally, making it somewhat easier to manufacture, though still complex by any standard. The gas system was modified to reduce the violent recoil, and the bipod was strengthened. The Type 2 was still essentially the same weapon, but refined based on combat experience and manufacturing realities. Now, we come to one of the most intriguing aspects of the FG-42 story. Why was this revolutionary weapon restricted solely to the Fallschirmjäger? Why didn't the Wehrmacht, the regular German army, adopt it for widespread use? The answer is complex and reveals much about the politics and practicalities of Nazi Germany's war effort. First, there was the issue of production capacity. Even with the simplified Type 2 design, the FG-42 remained difficult and expensive to manufacture. Germany was producing millions of Kar-98K rifles and hundreds of thousands of MP-40 submachine guns. These weapons were simple, reliable, and could be produced quickly by semi-skilled labour in dispersed factories. The FG-42 required skilled machinists, specialised equipment, and high-quality materials. Total production of all FG-42 variants throughout the war is estimated at only around 7,000 weapons, possibly fewer. This contrasts with over 14 million Kar-98K rifles produced. There simply wasn't the industrial capacity to replace standard infantry weapons with FG-42s, even if that had been desired. Second, there were political and organisational factors. The Fallschirmjäger were controlled by the Luftwaffe, not the Heer, the army. The FG-42 was developed at the Luftwaffe's request, using Luftwaffe funding and procurement channels. There was significant rivalry between different branches of the German military, and the Wehrmacht had its own weapons development programs. The army was investing in weapons like the STG-44, the first true assault rifle, which fired an intermediate cartridge rather than a full-power rifle round. The Wehrmacht saw this as the future of infantry small arms, and they weren't entirely wrong. There was little incentive for the army to adopt a Luftwaffe weapon when they had their own programs. Third, the Fallschirmjäger's specific operational needs made the FG-42's high cost and complexity more justifiable. Paratroopers were elite troops used in specialised operations. They jumped behind enemy lines, often cut off from resupply and reinforcement. Each paratrooper needed to be a force multiplier, capable of engaging targets at various ranges and in different tactical situations. The versatility of the FG-42 was crucial for these missions, in a way it might not have been for regular infantry who operated as part of larger formations with dedicated machine gunners, riflemen and support weapons. For a regular infantry soldier, having a Kar-98K rifle and having some squad members carry MP-40S or MG-42 machine guns made perfect sense. For a paratrooper who might find himself isolated with a handful of comrades facing unknown opposition, having a weapon that could do everything was worth the extra cost. Fourth, By the time the FG-42 was reaching meaningful production numbers, Germany's strategic situation had fundamentally changed. After the disaster at Crete, Hitler was reluctant to authorize large-scale airborne operations. The Fallschirmjäger increasingly fought as elite light infantry rather than as paratroopers. Their numbers remained relatively small, in the tens of thousands, rather than the hundreds of thousands or millions that made up the Wehrmacht. Equipping this limited number of elite troops with an expensive specialized weapon was feasible. Equipping the entire German army would have been impossible. There's also a darker element to this story. By 1943 and 1944, when FG-42 production was ramping up, Germany was losing the war. Industrial facilities were being bombed, resources were scarce, and the military situation was deteriorating on all fronts. The limited numbers of FG-42s produced reflected not just deliberate restriction, but also the harsh realities of a collapsing war economy. Even if the Wehrmacht had wanted to adopt the FG-42 widely, they likely couldn't have produced enough to make a difference. So where did the FG-42 see combat? The weapon was used in Italy, where Fallschirmjäger fought bitter defensive battles from Salerno to Monte Cassino to the Gothic Line. It saw action on the Eastern Front, particularly during the desperate battles in 1944 and 1945, as the Soviets pushed into Eastern Europe. Some FG-42s were used during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, Germany's last major offensive in the West, and they were present during the final defense of the Reich in 1945. In all these engagements, the FG-42 earned respect from both its users and those who faced it. Allied intelligence reports noted the weapon and recognized its capabilities. American soldiers who encountered the FG-42 were particularly impressed. After the war, captured examples were extensively tested by US ordnance experts. These tests confirmed what combat reports had indicated. This was an exceptionally advanced weapon. The straight-line stock design, the ability to switch between closed-bolt and open-bolt firing, the overall concept of a lightweight automatic rifle, all of these ideas influenced post-war American weapons development. You can see elements of the FG-42's design philosophy in weapons like the M60 machine gun, and even in modern rifles like the AR-15 platform. What made the FG-42 one of the most advanced rifles of World War II? It wasn't just one feature, but the combination of innovative solutions to complex problems. The straight-line stock was revolutionary. The dual firing system was ingenious. The overall concept of a selective fire rifle that could serve multiple roles anticipated the modern assault rifle concept, even though it used a full-power cartridge rather than an intermediate round. The attention to weight saving in every component showed sophisticated engineering. The ergonomics, with controls placed for intuitive use, were ahead of their time. And it actually worked. Despite its complexity, despite the manufacturing challenges, despite the harsh conditions of combat, the FG-42 functioned reliably enough to earn the trust of the soldiers who carried it. If we compare the FG-42 to other rifles of the era, its advanced nature becomes even clearer. The standard American infantry rifle was the M1 Garand, an excellent weapon, but one that was semi-automatic only, used an 8-round N-block clip, and had no provision for automatic fire. The Soviet SVT-40 was a capable semi-automatic rifle, but was also not fully automatic, and proved somewhat fragile in field conditions. The British still relied heavily on the bolt-action Lee Enfield. The FG-42 could do everything these weapons could do and more. It was closer in concept to post-war battle rifles like the M14 or the FN-FEL, weapons that wouldn't enter service until the 1950s, a full decade later. Even compared to the German STG-44, often credited as the first assault rifle, the FG-42 held its own. The STG-44 fired an intermediate cartridge, which made it easier to control in automatic fire and allowed soldiers to carry more ammunition, definite advantages. But the FG-42 fired a more powerful round with greater range and penetration. For the specialized needs of paratroopers, who might need to engage targets at longer ranges and who valued versatility over volume of fire, the FG-42's full-power cartridge made sense. Both weapons represented different approaches to the same problem: how to give the individual soldier more firepower and flexibility. The legacy of the FG-42 extends far beyond its limited wartime production. Modern firearms designers still study this weapon, still learn from its innovations. The US M60 machine gun, introduced in the 1950s, borrowed several features from the FG-42, including aspects of its feed system and gas operation. The concept of a lightweight, versatile automatic rifle became the foundation for modern light machine guns and designated marksman rifles. The straight-line stock design is now standard in weapons from the AR-15 to the G36 to countless others. Every time a modern soldier shoulders a rifle where the stock aligns with the barrel, they're benefiting from Louis Stange's insight in 1942. There's a certain tragedy to the FG-42 story. Here was a weapon that represented a genuine leap forward in small arms technology, created by a designer of remarkable skill, yet it arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the course of the war. The Fallschirmjäger who carried it appreciated its capabilities, but they were fighting for a cause that was ultimately doomed. The weapon's restriction to a small elite force meant that its innovations didn't spread as widely as they might have. And the complexity that made it so capable also ensured that it would never be produced in the numbers needed to make a strategic difference. Today, original FG-42 rifles are extraordinarily rare and valuable. A genuine example can sell for over $100,000 to collectors. Several companies produce semi-automatic reproductions for the civilian market, allowing firearms enthusiasts to experience this piece of history firsthand. Museums around the world display FG-42s, often as centerpieces of their World War II small arms collections. The weapon has appeared in countless books, documentaries, and even video games, cementing its place in popular consciousness. What can we learn from the story of the FG-42? Perhaps it's a reminder that technological superiority alone doesn't win wars. Germany produced some of the most advanced weapons of World War II, from jet aircraft to guided missiles to rifles like the FG-42, yet still lost. Strategic resources, industrial capacity, manpower, logistics, all of these matter as much as or more than having the most sophisticated equipment. The FG-42 also demonstrates the importance of learning from battlefield experience. The weapon existed because soldiers who survived Crete demanded something better, and because military leadership listened to those demands. The rapid development and fielding of the FG-42, despite its complexity, shows what can be accomplished when there's a clear operational need and the will to meet it. The rifle also illustrates the tension between ideal solutions and practical constraints. The FG-42 was arguably the ideal weapon for paratroopers in 1942, but it was too complex, too expensive, and too difficult to produce for widespread adoption. Sometimes the perfect is indeed the enemy of the good, and a simpler, less capable weapon that can be produced in large numbers may be more valuable than a sophisticated weapon available only in limited quantities. This remains a relevant consideration in military. It becomes standard in military rifles for decades. Louis Stange's brilliant design overcame seemingly impossible requirements, creating a weapon that could serve as a rifle, light machine gun, and close-quarters weapon all in one-man portable package. Its straight-line stock, innovative operating system, and overall design philosophy influenced generations of firearms that followed. While limited production numbers and restriction to Fallschirmjäger units meant it never achieved widespread impact during the war, the FG-42's legacy lives on in the modern rifles carried by soldiers around the world. It remains a testament to innovative engineering, a fascinating footnote in the history of World War II, and a reminder that sometimes the most advanced technology emerges from the most desperate circumstances. The FG-42 was truly revolutionary, a weapon decades ahead of its time, and one that deserves its place as one of the most remarkable small arms ever created.